What is up, everyone? Roy here, and you are listening to the Clemens with a Z podcast. Now, as most of y'all know, I've been visiting different churches this past year or so, trying to understand how they approach worship, community, the big moments of faith, trying to answer questions that I have. Some of the big ones are: is church all about consumerism? Is church a cult at its core? Things like that. And I've seen some really beautiful things, but I've also noticed trends that leave me feeling a bit uneasy and confused. One of these trends I'm going to speak about here today on this episode is baptism. Because it seems that baptisms have become more like a highly publicized event. It's like a spectacle, complete with promotional t shirts, decorative backdrops, and a flood of social media posts. And it makes me wonder a couple of things. Have we turned something sacred into a marketing tool? And where does that leave the person being baptized? And that's why I've titled this episode Baptism or Branding, reflecting on sacred acts in modern churches. Now, baptism for many people is one of the most significant moments in their spiritual journey and their lives. I know it was for me. I used to celebrate baptism day much like a birthday every year, December 10th. hmm it's supposed to be an ultimate act of faith, a symbolic washing away of sins, a public declaration of commitment. Now, for me, even though it was significant, I celebrated it in a lot of ways, it didn't feel transformative or spiritual. Instead, it felt like a performance, one that I don't know if I was ready for, and I didn't truly understand. So I'm going to share my personal baptism story, and then at the end, I'm going to talk more about what I've been seeing. And I want to walk you through how it was portrayed to me, what I expected, and how the reality was far from what I had imagined. And as I reflect on my own experiences, I'll explore some of the modern practices around baptism that have left me feeling uneasy, and why I think we might need to reconsider how we approach such an important and sacred moment in someone's faith journey. Now, looking back, my baptism was meant to be a defining moment of faith and renewal. Instead, it left me questioning not only the practices of the church, but also my own beliefs and self worth. The embarrassment I felt wasn't just about the water overflowing, as you will see. It was about feeling less than, not fully seen, and not truly connected to the spiritual significance that was supposed to underpin the ceremony. And when I say that it left me questioning the practices of our church, it wasn't like it was questions that were in the front of my brain. For the most part in my walk, these questions had to be put in the back of my brain, the back of my heart. They weren't things that I felt free to ask. And ultimately, how I was trained and taught these questions were my problem, not the church's, which is what kept me in the church for so long. Now, back to my story. When I was first learning about baptism as a kid, it was portrayed as this incredibly spiritual and supernatural experience. The adults and the leaders use stories like Jesus' baptism in Matthew 3:16 and 17, where the heavens opened and the Spirit of God descended like a dove, and a voice declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And that story painted such a powerful image in my mind of what baptism was supposed to be, a divine moment where something miraculous would happen. And they also talked about the story in Acts 2:41 where Peter preached and 3,000 people were baptized in a single day. I remember hearing that and being in awe. It felt like this monumental event that brought people together in this incredible act of faith and community. It gave me this sense that baptism wasn't just a personal decision, it was this massive, world changing moment. And I believed it wholeheartedly. Who wouldn't want that kind of experience? And when I mean they, I mean the leaders and the adults, made it sound like something extraordinary was going to happen to me. That when I came out of the water, I'd feel transformed like a new person. And so when it came time for my baptism, though, it really didn't feel anything like that. Instead of the heavens opening or a life changing moment of connection, I felt self conscious, embarrassed, and overwhelmed by the performance of it all. The weight of those stories and the way baptism was framed made the reality of my experience feel even harder to reconcile. And baptism was also taught as this thing that would wash away my sins, guarantee my place in heaven. This wasn't just a symbolic act, it was essential. Full immersion was essential. Without it, I was still separated from God, still carrying the weight of my sins. They didn't sugarcoat it. This was my ticket to eternal life. Without this, hell would be my final destination. Talk about pressure, right? And as you can see in our church, like most churches, baptism was a big deal. It was done very publicly, right in the middle of the service, in front of everyone. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance. I can remember how there would be so much singing. And there was always like one or two songs that we would sing. It'd be I've been redeemed or I've decided out of our Songs of the Kingdom worship songbook. And they would pause in the middle of it for each baptism. It was like this, it was a spiritual ceremony the whole congregation had to witness. People would line up to give speeches about the person being baptized, share their story, their sins, their transformation. It was like watching someone's spiritual resume being read aloud. And there were times when it wasn't as public. You know, in our church, we didn't have a building for the most part. So sometimes people would just get baptized in a pool, in someone's hot tub, away from the crowd. And that always felt different. It was quieter, more personal, and honestly, it seemed more intimate. Yet those were rare occasions. For me, it wasn't going to be one of those. It was going to be in front of everyone, whether I liked it or not. And so, right before I tell you the story, I also want to talk about how seriously we took the actual act of baptism. You heard me say earlier that words full immersion, your entire body had to be underwater, and it had to be done perfectly. Someone would stand by and watch closely by the baptistry to make sure every part of the body was fully submerged. If a toe, a hand, a knee didn't go under, they'd stop everything, they'd make you do it all over again. Or they would inform you after church that you'd have to get rebaptized. You know, I used to think it was kind of silly. And I used to imagine that in heaven, there might be these people walking around missing toes or knees because they weren't fully submerged during their baptism. And as absurd as that sounds now, it just captures how intense the pressure was to get everything right in that moment. And so when I got through the studies and I was going to get baptized, the day got closer, I would feel the weight of it all. You know, everyone was so excited for me. My parents, my friends, the leaders in the church. They would tell me how proud they were of me, how this was the biggest moment in my life. And they said it with such conviction that I started to believe it. or at least I tried to. But deep down, I wasn't sure I felt the way I was supposed to. I wasn't feeling this overwhelming joy or peace. What I felt was pressure, ultimately. Pressure to live up to the image they had created for me. Pressure to feel the way they said I should feel. And the public nature of it all just made it worse. What if I didn't feel these things? What if I didn't see God descending on me? What if when I was underwater, nothing happened? These were all questions that I had. It was a lot. It was a lot to handle. And I would imagine the moment standing there in front of everyone, all eyes on me. I was nervous, sure, but more than that, I was afraid of disappointing everyone. Like I said, what if I didn't feel the Spirit descend? What if they didn't do all those things? What if I came out of the water and I wasn't changed as the way they should be? It was like a constant loop in my mind. But I didn't dare voice them. After all, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was supposed to be incredible, a milestone in my life. I was about to be baptized, and baptized by my dad, which was always celebrated so intensely. I used to, leading up to that day, I was like, I bet my dad feels so rad right now, baptizing his son. I mean, this was cool. This was awesome. I wanted to please my dad so much, and I was about to do that, and it felt great. And I also felt that I was going to be welcomed into this church. I was going to be in, finally. That all of these people were now going to be my best friends in the world. I had a community, a club, all of these things. And I was told it would be life-changing, a moment to feel proud of. But things for me didn't go quite as planned. Now, our campus ministry didn't have a baptistry like most churches. That was because we met in a hotel. Like most of our ministries back then, we didn't have a building. So it was a very transient type of existence. And so we had this portable shell from a spa that some really servant-minded brother would take to this hotel every Sunday. And it worked well enough for what it was. But when I saw it filled nearly to the brim, my stomach dropped. Now, you see, I've always been kind of a bigger guy and chubby for most of my life. And moments like this, all eyes are on me and with a lot of insecurity. In a lot of ways, I didn't like being in front of people. When I was in front of people, I was hyper aware of how I looked. I wondered what people were saying. It was a lot of insecurity. And to make matters more complicated, see, I have tubes in my ears due to inner ear issues most of my life. I've had 8 surgeries on my ears, 8 sets of tubes put in, which means that if I'm going swimming, we're going to be underwater at any point, I have to wear earplugs. Yeah, I wear earplugs. I'm a 43-year-old man at the beach with earplugs. It's been that way my whole life, and it's always been something that is annoying to talk about. It gets more annoying as an adult because the only people around me with earplugs are little kids. Because you're supposed to grow out of it, and for some reason I never did. So the need to wear them made me feel even more self-conscious, adding another layer to my already heightened anxiety. So I climbed in with my dad, feeling the water shift under my weight, and I could see it rise and rise and rise, dangerously close to the edge, and my nerves just skyrocketed. I kept thinking to myself, please don't overflow, please don't overflow, please don't overflow. And so already you can see that my mind is on anything else but this moment. I can't think about what I'm about to do. I can't think about what's about to happen. I'm just a wreck. And so then it happened. My dad dunked me under, and what people told me is that water erupted over the sides, splashed everywhere. Anyone standing behind it or close to it got wet. It soaked the floor and came dangerously close to the people in the front row. When I stood up, dripping wet, instead of feeling renewed or transformed, I felt exposed. Water clinging to my ears with the earplugs, making me more aware of how different I looked and felt. And as I looked around, I saw people smiling and laughing. And I could hear the laughter. Sure, there were people clapping for me and excited, but all I could see was the laughter. And in that moment, any joy or excitement I had been holding on to was gone. I just wanted to fucking get out of there and disappear. This was supposed to be one of the most spiritual moments of my life, but instead, it became the most embarrassing. And so as I look back and reflect on all this, I see that this experience made me realize that the way baptism is presented can sometimes overshadow its true meaning. Instead of focusing on personal transformation and spiritual growth, it became a spectacle. It highlighted my insecurities and the church's emphasis on perfection. It made me wonder if the true essence of baptism is being lost in the process of making it look flawless and shareable. And so back to today. Now, I've been to lot of churches, a lot of churches here in my town, all over America. And I've noticed how baptisms are turned into these highly produced spectacles. It's not just about the act of baptism anymore. It's about the show surrounding it. People line up in their matching t-shirts. Yes, everyone has a t-shirt with some sort of saying on it like redeemed, found, connected, truly changed, something, whatever, something like that. They're ready to take the plunge. And as soon as they come out of the water, they're whisked off, some of them to pose in front of a branded backdrop, smiling for the camera, holding their new shirt. And I want to talk about the backdrop as well because I've seen this in multiple churches. Either the baptistry, behind the baptistry is some saying for the church. And all of these pictures, you have them in front of them with their cool new t-shirt and their backdrop. And this whole thing is accompanied by this perfectly timed music. And of course, it's all captured for social media. It feels less like a sacred moment and more like a marketing opportunity. And I want to point out some of these churches, the pictures placed on this wall, they're everywhere for people to see. And look, I'm not saying this to critique or to take away from the person getting baptized. For them, this might be a deeply personal and spiritual experience. And I respect that. I really do. I respect it. I'm saying it twice to let you guys know that I'm serious about that. I think it's a deeply beautiful and personal thing to dedicate yourself to something bigger than you, whether it's faith, community, or sense of purpose. But when I see these promotional t-shirts, the backdrops, the social media posts, the intensity of the production, I can't help but wonder, have we lost sight of what baptism is supposed to be? Have we turned something sacred into a fucking spectacle? And every time I'm witnessing these events, I can't help but think about that day, my day, about how something that was supposed to feel sacred and transformative instead felt like a performance. See the t-shirts, the backdrops, the posts on social media, and I wonder, are we doing this for the person being baptized? Are we doing this for the audience? And yeah, these churches may see these t-shirts and social media posts as a way to celebrate and welcome people, but I can't help but wondering if it takes away from the intimate and spiritual nature of this moment. So as I close, I wonder how we as a community handle these moments. Are we creating an environment that truly honors the sacredness of the act? Or are we unintentionally making it about everything else? So, my hope is that by sharing this, we can start a conversation about how to make baptism and other moments of faith feel as meaningful and transformative as they're meant to be. Maybe we could shift the focus back to the individual's faith and the meaning behind the act itself, rather than the optics of it all. Baptism should be about connection to God, connection to faith, connection to something bigger than ourselves, not about a t shirt or a photo op. My story and the stories I have observed remind me that this is something we should approach with reverence and respect. And if you've been through a baptism that felt meaningful or one that didn't quite live up to what you're promised, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going and work toward making these moments truly sacred again. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support. Remember, I'm just a channel, I'm not the source.